Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. It is really good to have you with us again.
It is.
And if this is your first time listening, we are glad you found us. We have a very specific type of listener in mind for this show.
We do.
We call you the learner. You're the person who, wants theological depth and clarity, but you're probably just exhausted by all the jargon that usually comes with it.
Right. The technical language that can sometimes be a barrier.
Exactly. You want to understand the Bible, not just read it. And you want to see how it applies to the real world.
And it is a pleasure to be here. And we have a massive task ahead of us today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly a massive one.
It's a big one.
We are tackling a text that you could argue changed the trajectory of Western history more than almost any other single document.
That's a huge claim.
It is, but I think it holds up. We're opening up the first chapter of Paul's epistle to the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at verses 16 through 32.
This is the heavy stuff. I mean, you look at church history, and every time there's a huge revival or a massive shift in understanding, it seems like the book of Romans is right at the center of it.
Always. You've got Augustine,
Martin Luther,
John Wesley.
Yeah.
They all seem to hit a wall, and then they hit Romans, and just everything changes for them.
Yeah. But before we dive into the verses themselves, we really need to set the scene. I mean, Paul isn't writing this in a vacuum. He's writing to Rome.
And context is everything. It's always everything. If you don't get the context, you miss the punchline. You miss the whole point.
So what's the context?
Rome wasn't just another city. It was, for all intents and purposes, the capital of the known universe.
The center of it all?
The absolute center of status, of money, of imperial force. If you lived in Rome, you were constantly, every single day, reminded of who was in charge.
Oh, so?
Well, you had marble temples on every corner. You had military parades. The sheer unimaginable wealth of the empire was just on display everywhere. The motto of the day was the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome.
Right. But that peace wasn't exactly a handshake and a smile, was it?
No, not at all. It was peace enforced by the iron fist of Caesar. It was a culture that was just obsessed with winning.
Okay.
Influence was the real currency. Weakness was, it was despised.
Mm-hmm.
And honor your public reputation, that was more valuable than money.
So your social standing was everything.
You lived and died by it.
Okay, so into the middle of the city that worships strength and victory, you have Paul. And he is writing about a Jewish carpenter who was executed by the Roman state.
Right.
A crucified Messiah. I mean, to the Roman mind, a message centered on a cross wasn't just weird.
It was a scandal. It was utterly scandalous. It was the very definition of weakness and humiliation.
So that's the central tension we're going to explore today.
That's it, exactly. The contrast between what the world calls strength and what God calls strength.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really analyze the source material to understand the gospel, not as good advice,
No?
but as dynamics, as you called it, explosive energy.
And then on the flip side of that, we have to talk about wrath.
Yeah. That is a word that makes modern people, myself included sometimes, squirm.
It does. It sounds so archaic.
But we're going to see that in this text, wrath isn't some emotional outburst from God.
Not at all. It's a settled judicial reality. And as always, we're viewing this through the lens of Reformed theology and the Westminster Confession. We're looking at God's sovereignty and humanity's total inability to save itself.
Okay, so that brings us right to section 1, the thesis. This starts in Romans 1, verses 16 and 17.
It does. And Paul opens with a statement that sounds so simple, but it is just loaded with cultural dynamite.
What does he say?
He says, I am not ashamed of the gospel.
Let's just stop there for a second. I am not ashamed. That's a really interesting way to phrase it, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, usually if I say I'm not ashamed of my car, it kind of implies that my car is a bit of a beat-up clunker, but, I still like it.
That's a great analogy.
So why does he use a negative there? Why not just say, I am proud of the gospel?
Well, that's a figure of speech. It's called a litotes. It's where you use a negative to affirm a really, really strong positive.
Okay.
So when Paul says, I am not ashamed, he isn't just saying, oh, I'm not embarrassed by this. He's saying, I am incredibly proud of this. Or maybe even, I have absolute terrifying confidence in this.
But you're right. I'm picking up on that defensive tone. He's saying it because in that culture, the gospel was something to be ashamed of.
Oh, objectively shameful.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Because of the cross.
Entirely because of the cross.
Yeah.
We wear crosses as jewelry today. We put them on our steeples.
Right. It's a symbol of piety.
It is now. But in the first century, the cross was an instrument of state terror. It was reserved for the lowest of the low slaves, insurrectionists. It was designed specifically to strip you of all dignity.
So to go into the capital of the empire, into Rome, and say, my king is the guy you guys nailed to a piece of wood.
It was social suicide.
It was laughable.
Utterly laughable. You would be dismissed as a fool.
So Paul is intentionally defying the world's definition of status. He's looking at the entire Roman Empire and saying, you think you have strength. You think Caesar has strength. No, I have the real thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he defines that strength in the very next breath. He says, the gospel is the power of God for salvation.
And the Greek word there is dynamis.
Dynamis. It is where we get our word dynamite. But we have to be really careful with that English connection.
How so?
Well, dynamite blows things up. It destroys. The dynamis of God constructs. It rescues. It builds.
I think a lot of people, maybe most people, view the gospel as persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to present in a really good argument, and if you agree with my argument, then you're saved. It's like a sales pitch.
Right. A transaction of ideas.
But Paul seems to be saying something very different here. It's not influence. It's a tool. It's an active force.
That distinction is just vital. Influence is me trying to convince you to change your mind. Strength, in this theological sense, is God acting on a spiritually dead heart. The source material we're looking at points out that the gospel is not a set of moral tips or, lifestyle improvements.
It's not try harder and do better.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
It is an operation of God that creates willingness in a person who was previously, spiritually, a corpse. It's regeneration.
It reminds me of that line about the gospel being the instrument God uses to raise the dead. You don't offer advice to a corpse.
You can't.
You need dynamis to bring it back to life.
That is the Reformed view in a nutshell. And Paul says this force is for everyone who believes, but then he adds that little phrase that can sometimes trip people up.
To the Jew first and also to the Greek.
Right.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Why that distinction? Is there some kind of ranking system going on there? A hierarchy?
That's a good question. It's a priority of redemptive history, not a ranking of worth or value.
What do you mean by redemptive history?
Well, God made his covenants with Israel. The Messiah came through the Jewish line. So the message by divine design goes to the house of Israel first. But it doesn't stop there. It spills over to the Greek, which is just Paul's shorthand for all the Gentile nations, everybody else.
So the scope is universal. It's for everyone who believes.
Right.
But the historical order, the rollout, matters.
The historical order matters, yes.
Okay, that clarifies things. Moving to verse 17, this is where we get into some of the really heavy theology.
This is the heart of it.
Paul says, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed. Now this phrase, the righteousness of God, this used to terrify Martin Luther, didn't it?
It terrified him to the point of hatred.
Yeah.
I mean, he said he hated the phrase. You have to understand Luther's psychology. He was a monk, and he was absolutely obsessed with his own sinfulness.
He felt the weight of it.
Constantly. He knew God was holy, and he knew with every fiber of his being that he was not. So before his big breakthrough, Luther understood the righteousness of God as God's active, distributive justice.
Active justice. What does that mean in, plain English?
It means the standard God uses to judge and punish sinners. It means God's the judge who sits on the bench. He looks at the law. He looks at you. He sees you broke the law, and he sentences you.
So when Luther read that the gospel reveals God's righteousness, he heard, the good news is that I'm going to show you just how much I'm going to crush you because you aren't perfect.
Exactly.
That sounds like very bad news, not good news. If the gospel is just a spotlight showing me how much God hates my sin, I don't want it.
It's terrible news if that's what it means. But Luther's breakthrough, which really was just a rediscovery of Paul's original meaning, was realizing that this is the justitia passiva.
Okay, that's the Latin term for passive righteousness.
It is.
Now, passive usually sounds like laziness, like I'm sitting on the couch eating chips. That's not what it means here, is it?
No, not at all. In this context, it's a grammatical term. It doesn't mean God is passive. It means we are passive in the act of receiving it. It is the righteousness God provides.
Okay, an analogy might help here.
Think of it like a debt. A massive mortgage debt you can never pay. Active righteousness is the bank showing up every day demanding you pay it.
Which I can't do.
Which you can't do. Passive righteousness is a billionaire walking in, writing a check to pay off your entire mortgage, and then handing you the receipt that says paid in full.
So it's not the righteousness God demands from us, it's the righteousness God gives to us.
Yes. It's a gift. It's a forensic status.
Forensic meaning legal.
Legal. It's a legal verdict. In the courtroom of heaven, God the judge credits the perfect record of Christ to the believer. It is an alien righteousness because it comes from completely outside of us.
We don't manufacture it. We can't.
We just receive it.
And the mechanism for receiving it is faith. From faith to faith. I love that image of faith as just an empty hand.
That's all it is?
It's not a work. It's not like God says, okay, you did the hard work of believing, so now I'll pay you with salvation.
Correct. Faith is the instrument. It is just the open hand that accepts the gift. The source makes a great point here. The gospel saves because it provides what the law demands but cannot possibly give.
The law says, be perfect.
And we say, I can't.
And the gospel says, here is Christ's perfection. Take it.
That is the good news.
And that is the thesis of Romans. It is the glorious high point. But then, right at verse 18, Paul takes a hard, sharp turn. We move from the good news to the bad news.
We do. Section 2, the diagnosis. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven.
And that little word for is the hinge, isn't it?
It's the hinge on which the entire argument swings. The gospel is necessary because the wrath of God is revealed. You cannot understand the cure if you don't accept the diagnosis.
Okay, let's talk about wrath. Because we have to be honest, modern people, we hate this concept.
You really do.
In our culture, wrath sounds like a guy losing his temper, someone cuts you off in traffic, and you have road rage. Is that what God is doing? Is he just, having a bad day and lashing out?
Not at all. And this is where we have to strip away our human projections. The Greek word here is orgou. It refers to a settled, holy opposition.
A settled opposition.
It's not a mood swing. God doesn't wake up on the wrong side of the bed. This is his consistent, righteous, holy reaction to everything that contradicts his perfect nature.
Okay, help me visualize that. Because settled opposition still sounds a little bit abstract.
Okay, think about it this way. If God is good, he must hate evil.
Right.
Imagine a judge who presided over a terrible case involving, say, child abuse or genocide. If that judge looked at all the evidence, saw the horror of it, and just shrugged and said, well, I love everyone, so I'm not going to get angry about this, would you think that judge is a good judge?
No. I'd think he was corrupt. Or maybe that he didn't care about the victims at all.
Exactly. Indifference to evil is not love. It's a moral failure. If God loves what is good, he must intensely hate what destroys the good.
So wrath is like the immune system of the universe reacting to a virus.
That's a great way to put it.
It isn't a temper tantrum. It is the necessary reaction of holiness to sin.
It's a function of his goodness, not a violation of it. And Paul says this wrath is revealed from heaven. It's a present reality.
So it's happening now.
Yes, it's a divine verdict that is already in motion. It's not just something waiting for the end of the world. And Paul identifies the target very clearly: ungodliness and unrighteousness.
Are those just synonyms, or is there a difference between them?
There's a logical sequence there. Ungodliness, the Greek is asabia, refers to vertical rebellion. It's a refusal to worship God as God.
Okay, the Godward dimension.
Right, and then unrighteousness, adikia, refers to the horizontal injustice, the moral crookedness we show toward other people.
So the vertical relationship breaks, and then the horizontal relationships break as a result?
Always.
Bad theology leads to bad ethics.
Every single time. False worship produces false living. You break the first commandment, worshiping God alone, and inevitably you start breaking all the others. You stop loving your neighbor because you first stop loving God.
Now, here's the objection that everyone raises at this point.
I think I know where you're going.
Well, that's not fair. What if people don't know about God? What about the person on the deserted island who's never heard the gospel? How can they be held accountable?
Paul anticipates that, doesn't he?
He does, head on. This is the doctrine of general revelation. Paul says in verses 19 and 20 that God has made his eternal power and divine nature plain in the things that have been made.
The theater of nature.
Exactly. The cosmos itself speaks intelligibly of a creator. The stars, the seasons, the complexity of a single cell.
So nobody can plead ignorance.
Paul uses a legal term here, anapologetos. It means without excuse. The source material is very firm on this. We need to reject the myth of the innocent pagan.
So there's no one who lacks the basic information necessary for accountability.
That's his point. The problem isn't the transmission of the signal. It's the reception on our end.
And that brings us to the mechanism of suppression. Paul says they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. What does that look like? The visual analogy that's often used here is just perfect. Imagine you're in a swimming pool, and you have a fully inflated beach ball.
Okay.
And you're trying to hold it underwater. What happens?
Well, it fights you. It wants to come up. You have to constantly, actively push it down.
And it takes energy, doesn't it? It takes active, continuous exertion. That is what Paul says we are doing with the knowledge of God.
So the truth of God is pressing in on us from every side.
From the complexity of the human eye, to the mathematical precision of the galaxy, to the moral law that's written inside our own hearts, it's all pushing up.
And to deny God requires an active exertion of will. You have to keep holding that beach ball down.
You do.
That really changes how we view atheism or agnosticism, doesn't it? It suggests that unbelief isn't primarily an intellectual problem, like, oh, I just don't have enough data.
No, it's a moral problem. It is a hostility of the will.
Yeah.
It is intellectual dishonesty at the deepest possible level. It's not that people can't see, it's that they won't see. Because seeing would require submission. If I admit there is a God, I have to admit that I am not him.
And that I owe him something.
And I owe him my allegiance, my worship, my life. And the fallen human heart hates that. We want to be our own gods.
Which moves us right into section 3, the downward spiral. Verses 21 through 23. Paul identifies the very root of this apostasy. It starts with 2 specific refusals.
That's in verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. Those are the 2 primal sins.
A refusal of glory and a refusal of gratitude. That
Yeah.
refusal of gratitude really stands out to me. We don't usually list ingratitude next to murder or theft on our list of big sins.
We don't, but we should.
But Paul puts it right there at the headwaters of the river of sin.
Because ingratitude is the gateway to practical atheism. Think about what gratitude is. To be grateful is to acknowledge that you are a recipient.
That you're dependent.
You're dependent. Someone else provided for you. The fallen human ego hates that. It despises dependency. We want to be self-made. We want to be autonomous.
So ingratitude is the desire to enjoy the gift while ignoring the giver.
Exactly.
It's like a teenager living in their parents' house, eating their food, using their Wi-Fi, but refusing to speak to them or even acknowledge they exist.
That is a perfect analogy. It's a profound cosmic rudeness.
Yeah.
And when you cut yourself off from the giver, from the source of all light and life, what happens to your mind?
It goes dark.
It goes dark.
This is the noetic effects of sin, right? That's the theological term for how sin messes with our thinking.
It is. Paul says they became futile in their thinking and their foolish heart was darkened.
And then there's that great irony. Claiming to be wise, they became fools.
It's intellectual suicide.
It is.
When you remove the ultimate reference point,
Yeah.
God, all of your other reasoning becomes distorted. You could be brilliant. You can have a PhD. You can be a rocket scientist. But if your foundational premise is that there is no God, your entire worldview is skewed.
You've lost the North Star, so your map is useless no matter how well drawn it is.
Your map is useless. You're building castles in the air.
And because we are built to worship, we don't just stop worshiping when we reject God. We just find something else to worship.
We have to. We are homo adorns worshiping beings. We cannot turn off our worship function any more than we can turn off our hunger for food. We only change the object of our worship.
And this leads to what Paul calls the great exchange.
It does. He says they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images of mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things.
It's a trajectory of decreation, isn't it? In Genesis, you have God, then man, then animals. Here, humanity puts itself below the animals it was supposed to have dominion over.
Precisely. And there's a spiritual law at work here.
Yeah.
We become like what we worship.
What do you mean?
If you worship the true God, who is glorious and loving and just, you are elevated. You become more truly human. If you worship money or sex or political power or even animals, you're degraded. You become smaller. You become more beast-like.
Today, we might not be bowing down to statues of birds or snakes.
Well, most of us aren't anyway.
But the source material mentions modern idols. The principle is the same.
Absolutely the same. We exchange the creator for the sovereign self. We worship our own autonomy.
My truth, my body, my choice.
All of those are expressions of self-worship. Or we worship the economy. Or we worship a political party. These are the creeping things of the modern age. We look to them for salvation, for meaning, for our identity.
And just like the golden calf in the Old Testament, they cannot deliver. They just take from us.
They only take. Which brings us to the most terrifying part of this whole chapter, section 4, the sentence.
We have seen the crime suppression of truth, ingratitude, idolatry. Now we see the punishment. And it's not what people expect it to be. This is verses 24 through 32.
3 times, like a tolling bell, Paul uses the phrase, God gave them up. The Greek word is pareidoken. This is a judicial handing over.
This is that passive wrath we touched on earlier, isn't it?
It is. We often think of judgment as lightning bolts from the sky or, fire and brimstone. We expect God to come down and smack the sinner. But sometimes the worst possible judgment God can inflict is simply to remove his restraining grace and say, okay, have it your way.
Thy will be done.
That is the most terrifying sentence a sinner can ever hear. C.S. Lewis talked about this. He said there are two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, thy will be done, and those to whom God says, in the end, thy will be done.
So God lets sinners have exactly what they want. He lets them experience the full weight of their own disordered desires.
He takes the leash off.
He does. And there's a progression here, a downward spiral in the judgment itself. Stage 1 is in verse 24.
God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity.
Notice that connection again. Because they exchanged God for the lie, they begin to dishonor their own bodies.
The body isn't neutral. It's not just a machine we live in. It's part of the creation order. When you disconnect from the Creator, you start using the creation, and specifically your own body, in ways it was never designed for.
So it moves from vertical idolatry to horizontal degradation.
Yes. And then we get to stage 2 in verses 26 and 27. Dishonorable passions.
This is where the text gets very specific about sexual ethics, and we need to navigate this carefully, sticking to what the text actually says and the theology behind it.
We do. We need to understand Paul's argument here. He focuses on behavior that is contrary to nature. The Greek is paraphysin.
Now, when he says nature, is he just talking about cultural customs? Like, this is not how proper Romans behave.
No, in this context, nature refers back to the creation design. He's looking back to Genesis. He is looking at the biological and anatomical teleology, the intended purpose of male and female.
So Paul's arguing that just as humanity exchanged the true God for idols, they also exchanged the natural use of sexuality for what is unnatural according to that created design.
It's a mirroring effect. The spiritual confusion leads directly to a physical confusion.
And it's an echo.
It is. And the source material is very clear that we need to report this impartially. Paul sees this specific behavior not just as a random sin among other sins, but as a unique manifestation of judgment and disorder. It's like a signal flare that a society has turned its back on the Creator's design.
The text calls it a due penalty received in themselves.
It's an outworking of the idolatry. We have inverted the spiritual order, worshiping the creature instead of the Creator. So it makes a kind of terrible sense that the physical order would also be inverted.
If you don't know who God is, you eventually lose track of what a human being is.
You do. And then we hit stage 3 in verse 28, a debased mind.
That's a strong phrase.
It is. The Greek word is adokimos. It was a term used in metallurgy to describe metals that were tested and found to be impure. They were rejects.
So a coin that was counterfeit or a piece of metal that was too weak to be used.
It was adokimos. So a debased mind is a mind that can no longer function morally. It has lost its compass. It can't tell true north anymore.
It's the inability to distinguish right from wrong. Or maybe even worse, it's the ability to rationalize any evil.
It is total intellectual darkness.
Yeah.
Once you are given over to a debased mind, you can justify absolutely anything. You can call evil good and good evil. And that inevitably leads to total social collapse.
Which brings us to our last major section, section 5, the vice list. Verses 29 through 31. Paul just unleashes this whole catalog of sins. And I find it interesting that he doesn't just list the big ones that we would expect.
It's so comprehensive. I mean, he includes murder and strife, sure. But look closely at what else there. He includes gossip.
Gossip, envy, boastfulness. These are respectable sins in some circles.
They are. And then there's the one that hits home for every parent who's ever lived. Disobedient to parents.
That is shocking, isn't it? He puts disobedience to parents on the same list as haters of God and murder.
It is.
Why? Why is that so serious in his mind?
Because it represents the breakdown of the most fundamental social unit, the family. The family is the building block of civilization. When children no longer honor parents, the entire chain of authority and wisdom begins to decay, and it creates chaos.
He uses words like heartless and ruthless to describe the society.
He does. And the source notes that when a society turns from God, it becomes cruel. We lose our natural affections, we become hard.
So we have a society that is envious, gossiping, rebellious, and cruel. But the absolute pinnacle of this rebellion is in verse 32. It's not just doing these things, is it?
No. That's the final horrifying step. It's the approval. Though they know God's righteous decree, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them.
It's the normalization of sin.
It is demanding affirmation. It is no longer enough to be tolerated. The rebellion demands to be celebrated.
Why? Why is that applause so necessary?
Because deep down, the conscience, what Paul calls knowing God's righteous decree, is still ticking. It's still sending up those warning flares. So to silence that nagging inner voice, we need everyone else to clap for us. If everyone says it is good, then maybe, just maybe, I can convince myself that it's good.
It's safety in numbers. If we are all jumping off the cliff together, maybe the cliff isn't really there.
Exactly. But there's a trap here, isn't there? Paul is a master rhetorician. He has just painted this incredibly bleak picture of the pagan world. And you can imagine the religious person in Rome, maybe a Jewish moralist, nodding along the whole time.
Oh, absolutely. Say, yes, look at those terrible pagans. Look at those decadent Romans. They are so disgusting.
And that is exactly the trap. This list functions to indict everyone. Because if you look at that list honestly, you're on it. Have you ever gossiped?
Guilty.
Have you ever been envious? Have you ever been haughty or boastful?
Yes.
Have you ever disobeyed your parents?
Guilty on all counts.
We all are. No one can stand outside this diagnosis. Paul is preparing the reader for chapter 2, where he turns the gun on the moralist and says, you who judge, you do the exact same things.
So the pagan suppresses the truth with their immorality. The religious person suppresses the truth with their own morality and self-righteousness, but both are running from God.
So we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
We have all suppressed the truth. We have all exchanged the glory of God for something lesser. We have all been ungrateful.
Which brings us all the way back to the only cure. The only escape from the giving up, God giving us up to our sins, is the giving over of Christ on the cross.
That's the beautiful, terrible symmetry of the gospel. In judgment, God gives us over to our sin. In salvation, God gives Christ over for our sin.
So the thesis holds. The power of God, that dynamis, is the only force in the universe strong enough to break the cycle of the debased mind.
It's the only thing that can take a heart that is curved in on itself and turn it back toward God.
And it connects right back to that root sin we talked about. If the root sin is ingratitude,
then the cure must involve thanksgiving.
Eucharistic thanksgiving, the source calls it that. The remedy is to stop looking at yourself as the center of the universe and to look at Christ with an empty, open hand and just say thank you.
It is the death of pride. And the death of pride is the beginning of all true life.
So let's just summarize what we've unpacked today. We have these two great revelations happening at the same time.
We have the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. That is the glorious good news. And we have the wrath of God revealed from heaven against all ungodliness. And that is the terrible bad news that makes the good news necessary and beautiful.
The diagnosis is bleak. I mean, it's total depravity. Our minds, our hearts, our wills, our bodies, everything is affected by this suppression of truth. We can't think our way out of it, and we certainly can't behave our way out of it.
But the provision is perfect. It is Christ's righteousness, given freely to those who do nothing but receive it by faith.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. We talked a lot about the great exchange, exchanging the glory of God for lesser things. I think the challenge for all of us listening and for us sitting here is to ask, where are we making that exchange right now in our own lives?
That's the question.
Yeah.
It's so easy to point fingers at the culture out there. It's easy to read that vice list and see everyone else but ourselves.
But where am I personally exchanging the approval of God for the approval of man?
Where am I exchanging the clear truth of Scripture for a lie that just makes me feel a little more comfortable?
And maybe the most chilling question of all, if God's wrath is revealed by him letting us have our own way, where might we be mistaking God's judgment for our own freedom?
That's a heavy question. Are we celebrating something as liberty that is actually God handing us over to a master that will ultimately destroy us?
That is the question Romans 1 forces every single one of us to ask.
And the only safe answer is to run to the cross.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. This is Reformed Thinking. We will see you next time.
Grace and peace.